because you have to constantly moderate. So question coming, answer coming. So
Hello, I'm Professor Merlin Stone of St Mary's University London, and I'm going to chair this panel. In this panel, each of the members is going to speak for about 2 minutes on either an opportunity and a challenge, or just an opportunity in digital marketing, after introducing themselves. So over to you.
Many thanks. My name is Andy Jones. I am from Network Rail, where I head up the digital, social media and film team. Started off just with digital and they shoehorned a few extra roles in there. I should stop being good at what I do, I suppose. I was sitting here wondering whether it'd be good to start or fearful of being last, but I'm first now. I'm fearful of talking for too long or maybe too short. But anyway, I want to talk about an opportunity. I've got a great interest in marketing automation, and I've been working in that space for quite some time. And I think hand in hand with that goes personalization, which in some ways is the challenge that goes with that one. So I am very much intrigued, and I'm exploring new ways all the time within our context of the work in which we do and the audience in which we engage, of how you can streamline that process in terms of the automation, but also make it a far more engaging personal experience. And I think there comes the challenge. I'm all for it. I think the personalization, and we see the bots popping up, and I'm not massively against those. I'm against when they're used poorly, but I'm all for when they're used really well. And I think if it can enhance the experience and fast track that process of accessing information when needed, and we talk a lot of search, but we also talk of assistant, which I think it seems to be moving more and more towards. We're looking for ways of being assisted in achieving what we've set out to get with that access to information or buy a product or service. So for me, one of the greatest opportunities is to make things more streamlined and efficient in the automation space. And the challenge is getting the personalization part of it absolutely to hit the sweet spot. So those are my two thoughts. I shall pass on now.
Hi, my name is Chris Rees. I'm a Senior Digital Marketing Officer for Swansea Council, based in the Cultural Services team. So myself and two digital officers coordinate all of the digital marketing for tourism and events. So that covers sort of Visit Swansea Bay, Enjoy Swansea Bay, and also things like Wales Air Show and all of our cultural venues. My team manages quite a lot of different websites and associated social media accounts. We currently use tools such as Data Studio and Sprout Social to monitor the sort of success and engagement of our sort of activity. But sort of due to the sort of volume of sites and accounts that we manage, it's obviously quite difficult to analyse in depth, so it's been quite interesting today watching presentations about sentiment analysis and that kind of thing, really, and how we could possibly collaborate to sort of drill down in a bit more depth into what we do and improve by sort of looking into things like sentiment analysis. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Ahmed Jamal. I'm from Cardiff University. I specialize in marketing and strategy, and I'm going to talk about my area of expertise, which links with digital marketing as well. In terms of opportunity, I think the Western world, across the West, we have seen a significant change in demographics, particularly cultural diversity. So you have a lot of new ethnic minority groups which are well established, well sort of entrenched in the mainstream societies. They're very techno-friendly, they're mobile friendly as well. All the research indicators are that they use mobile phone more than any other communities in the, say in the UK, for example. So we have the opportunity to connect with communities which are culturally different, but the challenge is how best we can connect with them, given that they have cultural differences. So how can we get better cultural insights into these communities, understanding the psychological dynamics of why they engage with the marketeers before they actually target them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Marco Severo. I am from Federal University of Goiás in Brazil. I am a professor and researcher in marketing, divided into four parts. At first, I observe practical challenge for digital marketing, which is customer engagement is more social, individuals interact even more. It is multi-platform, diverse, cultural diverse, and they are interacting with broad touch points where they generate more data. Specifically, this reveals or unveil opportunities and challenges for researchers. They need to develop models to grasp, understand this reality, and their research must be managerial relevant and practical for businesses who are capable of generating this data. And this is also develops a theoretical challenge because digital marketing is reshaping the power, and now the form of interaction is customer to customer instead of firm to customer tradition. Specifically in Brazil, there is the challenge for small businesses. They have a few resources and they use social media to interact with their customers. We are observing a rise of influentials, and these influentials are reshaping marketing practice. And specifically on Facebook, we are observing, at least in Brazil, a death of Facebook, and companies are going into Instagram and other platforms such as WhatsApp to make business more social and more personal. So in my personal opinion, right now, research is trying to understand engagement, influencers, and the relationship with this, with ROI measures and sales measures. But in the future, with data explosion, our challenge is how to make good sense of it, specifically with automation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ashok Ranchod, and I'm currently at the University of Southampton. I've got a lot of interesting issues that I'd like to tackle, mainly because I come from a science background, and although I've been in marketing for a long time, I've run a biotech company, and we've set up a games degree at the University of Southampton, which I was instrumental in doing. So one of the things, I think, the opportunities that are available are trying to understand how AI, VR, etc., is going to reshape all the digital area as well, and bring that. I still don't know what the focus will be, but it's trying to understand what's going to happen in the future. And at the same time, we have a lot of opportunities to kind of think about the digitalization of health and other aspects, and trying to think about how people's lives can be improved, or how they can be less of a burden on society. So there's all the digital issues involved there, together with the challenges that we have in the environment of sustainability. So the challenges are we going to have consumption-related metrics? Are we going to look at things like sustainable consumption, and what are we going to do digitally in this area? Because quite often we get locked into just marketing and just kind of thinking about consumption, but we actually don't think about intelligent consumption. So I think these are the kind of areas that should, well, to my mind, should be of interest, and we should be challenging those.
Thanks, Ashok. So I'm going to build on what you said by identifying the two areas that I think are most important for us. One is the use of digital techniques and digital platforms as a coherent strategy by private sector and governments to solve problems. So a more general version of what you say, my own research area I'll be presenting later in terms of the mobility area and the health area, and how to break through the desire of governments to control the data instead of moving to an open data model, which is visible in London with the Open Data Store. And that's a serious problem. And in the UK, it's visible in the form of tens of thousands of extra deaths because of the unwillingness of the National Health Service to open its data, which is quite shocking. And the latest statistics showed the comparative death rates as being tens of thousands more in the health service, partly because it's a closed system. It's a closed system, and put on a pedestal by politicians of all breeds. So that's one area I'm working on. there's one area that is really important for us as academics. 3 out of the 4 presentations that I heard were at least 3 years behind the pace. And there's a serious issue of academics being disconnected with the leading edge of digital. We all have our own techniques for doing that. I do it through commercial projects and by staying in touch with my 10,000 or so LinkedIn contacts, most of whom work in the digital world. But many academics are disconnected. So quite a bit of what we heard was way behind the pace, with one exception, which was great. So we need to look hard at how we research things, how we focus too much on academic literature, which itself is also 3 years out of date, rather than using the grey literature with all its faults to identify what's going on at the moment and where things will be. I'm working on a project with IDC, the information analyst, looking at what is taught at university, and also in league with Ken Lordon, whose book, The Digital Firm, is the standard textbook on IT in business and used by Pearson. And what we're identifying is that the analysts themselves are at fault because they don't produce information in a digestible form for students. So that's my problem area that I think needs to be solved in order for us to turn out from university students who are actually up to speed, not in detail, but know what's what in the world of digital. So there we go. So end of me. Now it's time for the discussants, I think. So what's the next step, folks?
Over to the floor, I think.
So it's following on from that point, really, and probably more aimed at our industry experts than the academics. But it's about what you've seen today from the presenters and how you think we can improve what we're doing as academics to make it relevant to industry.
Having worked within academia as well as in the private sector as well, within Swansea University. And I think what you were saying was quite right. I think sort of closer working with actually sort of real world projects would perhaps sort of improve the data, that the sort of research. I say from a day-to-day point of view, most industry professionals use software like Data Studio or Google Analytics and social media sort of analytics, and so a lot of what I've heard this morning, by monitoring my own sort of team social media using those tools, we would have got much the same sort of results. But as I touched on earlier, it's quite specific to what the sort of area, the sector you're working in, or whatever your kind of end goal is. Obviously, you need to tailor your work to your business. Like, for instance, with Visit Swansea Bay, obviously, tourism is quite different to selling clothes. Working more closely with businesses would allow you to tailor your research so that companies can use it and sort of transfer it to their sort of problems more easily, I would say.
Andy first.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'd build on that too, and I'd strongly encourage the closer commercial working relationships you can have, and forging those commercial partnerships is all the better. We work with numerous organisations and research companies, agencies, and the information that we glean and learn from that arrangement we have is invaluable for us within our organisation. But also, you get to learn through various different procurement processes. You need to bring on software that does a specific job, and that in itself flashes out a whole new range of upcoming and emerging providers out there who are really blazing a trail, and it's fascinating to see. And then having those invited in to understand what our pain points are, they come up with the solutions that deliver against us, and they tend to be extremely innovative. So I would definitely encourage more working relationships. And I think, as was mentioned a few times, there were some of the papers which were a little out of date. So the automation one, I think in particular the systems one, I think the question was already posed a number of times. What were you looking at when that paper was put together? Because there's a lot out there already doing something similar, if not identical, or maybe even better than was put forward. So, having an eye on the ball with the commercial world would have, flashed that out very early on, I think. Yeah.
Is there a willingness to work with academics, though? Because but for academics, we need to publish what we do. And is there a willingness to, when you're working with consultants or market researchers, obviously they're working for you, not with you, that's the sort of relationship you'd have with an academic partnership then?
I would be very much open to it, and I think that whenever I've been approached, whether it's through academia or other partners, I've been very welcoming of partnerships, and I think it's a really good way to share experience from a commercial world, but also draw on the learnings from academia. So I'm very much in favour and positive of that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to add something more broader, because at Cardiff we have taken a more holistic approach. So we think that not only with the industry, but we need to have links with other stakeholders as well. So the academia are supposed to have a connection with the local communities, third sector, for example, as well, NHS, service providers, even with the Welsh government as well, and the university is taking steps for facilitating the interface between the academia and various stakeholders. And that brings to your second question, which is that, is it useful for us to have that interaction? And I would say a big yes, because if you have projects, say for example, how digital media can be used for the benefit of local community, and if I'm involved in that project, for example, you will find it will get published very easily. Thank you.
And I think that's a great point, and I was going to add to it. The big problem with many academics is to try and compete with industry, where we saw several examples, rather than work out the answer to the question, what value do they add, which is exactly what you've done. So I recently was sent a proposal that came out of several academics who wanted to design an app, a bit like Citymapper, but EU-based. And I said, this is rubbish. Citymapper's about 5 years ahead of where you are, and they're moving ahead. What you need to be doing is thinking about whether the app should be working with an open data store or not, for example, and what value can be added by integrating it with, for example, health applications, and not being totally focused on transport, or trying to increase mobility when most cities have the challenge of decreasing mobility because of congestion. So to any academic, I would always say, what is your value to industry? And you better ask the questions and answer them. Otherwise, you'll end up being very boring to industry, or wasting their time, rather than saying, actually, I don't want to compete with you guys. What I want to do is to look at the connections between what you're doing and your stakeholders, for example.
Yeah, thank you, Merlin. I think that's very much in the vein I would look at it, because in all honesty, if you look at a lot of research funding in universities, shrinking, and there's quite a lot of emphasis on working with industry. And in a sense, I think what academics should be leading the field, not following. But we tend to follow, because we tend to get concentrate on papers, and part of the problem with that is it's all old, and there's a lot of new stuff out there which should be incorporated into the research and used, and I think that is a serious problem. And the other area, I think that a lot of academics, certainly in my experience, have shoo-shooed and said, oh, it's not a proper research university grant. But the government is doing a lot with things like Innovate UK, KTPs, whatever. And I think that is a great opportunity for academics to engage with industry and do some cutting-edge research. And they should do it, you know? So that's my view.
Can I say one final point? I'll pass it back, which is journal editors also have a duty. If they only publish articles which themselves are based upon old other articles, i.e. citations of the recent past, then they are failing their duty to academics, because they need at least to have decent papers, not necessarily practitioner papers, because that's different, but ones with practitioner relevance, and that means generally forward-looking, because a lot of practitioner papers have been public relations exercises, which is not good. So journal editors have a big responsibility.
Thank you.
Also thinking outside the box. Also thinking outside the box, and perhaps looking at different areas like philosophy or mathematics or whatever, and not being hidebound, to be honest.
Okay, so back to you.
I just wanted to point out that there is a potential route for doing better as an academic. So, for example, there is impact case studies, which is actually working with an organization demonstrating that you have published something, and based on that published work, the organization has benefited. So the universities now are placing a lot of importance on that impact case, which can be as good as a 4-star journal publication.
So impact cases are 25% of the weighting in the next ref. If you look at last impact cases, because every university has been going through the last ref, hasn't it, looking at the impact cases, you'll see quite a lot of them were pretty vacuous in terms of industrial impact. They were actually rather impact on other parts of the public sector, and there were a few star cases where a research was able to demonstrate a really good commercial impact. We're not recommending, I think, that all the impact case studies should be commercial, but you need a good leavening of commercial case studies if you're going to demonstrate that you had an impact on industry. But go through them in detail, and actually the last lot were quite disappointing with a few exceptions. I don't know if you agree.
I don't know about that, but I think there is more emphasis on getting a better outcome now. So in terms of working with the industry, and not only, as I said, not just the industry, but other stakeholders as well, and looking into how much real impact we had, what sort of value we created not for the industry itself, but also for the society, for different stakeholders, for example, and that could become a basis for a very good, cracking good impact case study.
Yes, we just published in an open access journal a condemnation of the last ref as it applied to marketing. It's in Cogent Management, and happy to circulate it because it identified the different ways you can have impact other than the last model. The next ref will be, I think, more open-minded, but it's still got this slightly crazy idea of you must publish a journal article first and then demonstrate impact, which is not the way a symbiotic relationship with industry works. Sorry, Hemel.
My name is Vignesh. I'm from India. There are two questions. Question number one, from the industry perspective, if you the academic and say this is the area you need to work, I'm looking for some answers. Okay, can you think of a research problem for us? It can be in your language. Question number one. Question number two, is there a difference between the public sector and the private sector usage of social media to engage with people? In India, the gap is huge. If you look at government organizations, they use social media in a very, very rudimentary manner. You opened a Facebook account, you just started talking about it. Private sector does a lot more different. How is that in the UK? What is your experience?
Let's go with some commercial slides first, please, as usual.
Sorry, I'm only joking. So I think there's two, isn't there? So the first one, I think, in regards to what you're saying about how does it vary for us in the commercial world, I think it's slightly different. First of all, and we had a conversation earlier about this one in terms of fully understanding who it is that you're trying to engage with, why they come into you and what their needs are and how you address those. So that's first and foremost, understanding the audience. So we typically go through a very in-depth process of understanding that from a persona perspective, identifying who the customers are, and just really getting some granularity around knowing what's going to work for them if we are engaging on social media, which channels work best, and then devising the strategy and the tactical plan that delivers against that. But crucially, it's understanding how you're going to measure it, which I think a lot of people do overlook at the outset. So if you're not sure how you're going to measure it, then you're shooting into the dark a little, really. So that's I suppose how we differ. Even within our organisation, different areas of the company will work better on different social media accounts. So our exec members, for example, we discourage so much on Twitter just because the nature of what we're communicating, but LinkedIn is a far better environment. And then for general communication and storytelling, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, obviously it lends very well. So we carve the strategy depending on who the audience is and what we're trying to say. So that's, I guess, where we are. Would you like me to hand over to you for the first question?
Can you go back to that question?
Yes.
I would ask it again. Is there anything that you more specifically want? Or do you think it's a cheeky question, would be my thing. Why should I bother with you academics? Because I've got plenty of suppliers who can do the work faster and more in touch with reality.
I was called out. I nearly dodged the question, didn't I? No, It's a good question. So in response to that, I think that, we can work closely together. So some of the presentations earlier around sentiment, and it got me thinking that we went through a process not so long back of moving our call center operations to a new provider. And in part of doing that, it made me realize how intrinsically complex as an organization, as an industry, we inhabit, and to try and get people within this new environment up to speed of those complexities was quite tough. And one of the things we started doing around there was understanding audience a little better and sentiment. So some of it is done in an automated way through the systems we employ and use. And in others, we need to have the operator themselves who are fielding these questions, comments, inquiries, to exercise their own judgment. And sometimes the sentiment that the system has chosen may be a little off kilter. So they have to go in and make that adjustment to it. So I think it's something around that. And I asked the question so briefly earlier, it was what's the commercial impact of that in terms of sentiment against, the revenues or the overall brand equity or whatever it is that you're looking at. So I guess for me it would be, how can we work together on understanding the research that you're doing in these areas, so things around sentiment, trust, loyalty, and so on, and seeing how we can work together to deliver commercial results, and then provide that environment once more to test and validate that, to see if the recommendations that have been made have actually had some penetration.
Do you have a view on this?
Similarly, really, working in the public sector, we've got because we've got a range of sort of sub-brands from tourism through to promoting events. Obviously, most of our events are free, like the air show, so it's a sort of brand awareness sort of campaign, really raising the profile of the event and, maximising the number of people that come to the city and and spend money in Swansea businesses. So, sort of gauging a return on investment, it's difficult to sort of find a sort of tangible sort of KPI to measure that effectively. One thing that councils are committed to in Wales is the Health and Wellbeing Act, and what with the Swansea having quite a good year of events in terms of attracting major events like the biggest weekend, it would be quite nice to sort of examine sort of the sentiment, do some sentiment analysis on perhaps how that may have affected the sort of the mood of the city and sort of contributed to the health and well-being. So that was one thing that sprung to mind, really.
I think one of the things that academics can always contribute is by asking the hard questions as well. I've made my whole career asking the question, what about the customer? A really good example of that recently is the insane triple helix stuff, which forgot about the customer. It was government, industry, and academia, and now they've invented quadruple helix because the fourth one is the customer. It's just insane, but actually my whole career. But I'll give you a good example of what academics did. So the business model idea, which started to be articulated in the late part of the last century, is now common parlance among industry people. And when you ask the question, what's your business model? Most people in industry now know what you mean, whereas 10 years ago they didn't. And that's because academics gave a framework for discussing something and taking it beyond kind of trivial talk to a very serious financial and strategic question. And that really is the kind of big stuff that the academic can contribute, to which we all ought to aspire sometime during our career.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's about becoming more like the Greeks, sort of sitting there pontificating a bit as well, and trying to look at the bigger questions. Better routing,
Does our colleague at the end do that?
Well, I'm going to add that at least in Brazil, small businesses are looking or trying to survive using their data, and academics are closing their rooms, trying to develop difficult models that managers just want to make it simple, and that's enhancing and increasing an empty gap between them. We are not in the same level of development in terms of data privacy yet. So there is a surge in data generation, data availability, and they are more preoccupied in terms of business in how to relate this to performance and generate more sales. In our case, it's more difficult because we are in a public system, and this is more difficult to try to establish partnerships with the private sector.
Can I make a point on previous points? When we talked about impact, so it's fine, I'll just so basically, generally we mistook impact with engagement. So impact happens when you work with industry to solve a problem. Impact doesn't happen when you already have done the research and then try to, tell industry that look how well I have done and do you like it or not. That doesn't bring the impact, and that's what happens in last ref. In majority of cases, in many impact case studies, it was more engagement than impact. So end is offered for people to work with, identify the problem and work with, and then that lead to actual impact rather than anything else. So I just wanted to kind of just add in to that particular
I'm
point.
going to give you an example of what something I'm working through now, and it's going to be presented tomorrow, but it's exactly that. So I wrote an article for not a rated paper, The Bottom Line, which is an information management journal, because I know the editor, and it's an invited paper, and we all have to cut corners. So I was looking hard at the information management and smart cities and mobility. So I wrote to the marketing director of Transport for London, who I didn't know, but I had linked to, saying, can I come and do a case study on what you guys are doing? So he said, yes, of course. He happens to be a thinking marketing director. He runs 6 different business models, by the way. There are no London buses, by the way. They're all run by other companies. They may be red, but they're run by Deutsche Bahn, RATP, all the rest of it. Taxis, he's a regulator, etc. So I published the case study, and a month later, I got an email from Bosch, the giant German electronics company, saying, I love your paper, can I meet you? And as the discussions went on, and we were involved also with Amazon Web Services and a whole range, because the data of Transport for London is hosted by Amazon Web Services, so is all the data in Swansea, DVLA, that's all hosted by Amazon. Suddenly I realized there was a hole in what everybody was trying to do based upon the customer. And the idea of having smart mobility was disastrous, because actually in a big congested city, you want less mobility. Yeah. Less mobility with more work at home. So I said, where does this happen? Well, you'll hear the answer, later today, very, very briefly, but that's engagement. So I'm not even sure whether it's going to work for REF, but actually, do you know, I don't care, because it's so interesting and so engaging that I'm having fun. And it works for REF, well and good, and I will have published, and hopefully with you guys as well, but that's the way of thinking, which is for you to sit down and say, I want to engage, let me engage, exactly as you said, and let's see what comes of it. But to have something to say is important. And if you have nothing to say except you did this tiny little study, then most people in industry are going to turn up their nose, in my view. So there we go.
And it is quite rightly about looking at the big societal issues. I mean, as you say, if there's a lot of emphasis on working from home, just think about the impact on the environment and the whole host of other kind of repercussions on people and society. I mean, it's pretty interesting.
Well, so one of the things we're looking at is, suppose in the morning you get a message which says stay at home, your whole work group stays at home because your routes are messed up. I was going to use another term, actually. Don't go into the city. How's that going to happen? It's all about information and business models and data. That thinking, the details can be left to industry, because we can't compete with industry in how to make it happen. But you need an information platform at the centre, called Amazon probably, but who knows. But that's the kind of thinking we should aspire to. Otherwise, we'll end up, all of us, doing lots of trivial bits of research. But it's okay for me to say that because I'm old. Who's next? Who's next?
Hi, so I'm Elias Papas from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So we have been talking for maybe more than half an hour about the impact and about how we impact, how we bring value to the customer, to the industry, to everyone, and that seems a lot like our practical implications, right? Which are, of course, very important, and maybe they come from what you said, that we are, maybe especially in the digital world, we are more technology driven, so that's why research sometimes is maybe a bit more behind. But what I've been thinking for the past few years is that, so even today we had many papers talking about behavior, adoption, and so on of technology in different forms and in different technologies, and that's always a thing that we should be interested in. And 10 years ago, there was this very interesting paper on information systems discussing as we need to change our methodologies or our approaches of how we view existing phenomena, and we need to evolve. So 10 years fast forward, and bringing that to marketing, 2 months ago, there was a commentary paper on academic marketing review from Bagozzi discussing the need to come up with new marketing theories. And I say that now because we have been focusing on the impact of our work on the industry, so the practical implications. But if we want to publish, and if we want to generate some knowledge for our students that are waiting for to learn something new from us, then we need to focus also on the theory, right? So my question is, how can we evolve, or our approaches, how they can, or if they need to evolve? I think they need, but that's part of the question as well, to change so we can actually move to this new digital era, because we are using methodologies and approaches that were invented before the digital era, right?
I'll start that one off and before you there's something to say. But your question is exactly the right question, but you only can answer it, because unless you decide where you're going to make your contribution, whether it's in the world of theory or brilliant empirical study, you will always find you're doing tiny bits of research that are published in a low-grade journal. So you have to have something to say. So I'm lucky, I'm an older generation, so we didn't have the awfulness of the ref to deal with. And people would publish our views and our thoughts about what was important, and they were used a lot in industry, compared with today, when the studies are very kind of full of minutiae and they're not really terribly interesting to industry. So you probably have to do both. In other words, you have to have your boring track, which is for 2- and 3-star journals, but it's very, very nitty-gritty and all the rest of it. But don't let go of the dream. And you better stick to it, because unless you have the dream, you'll find yourself in 20 years' time looking back and saying, what did I contribute? And then when you pass away, God forbid, the waters will close over you on Google Scholar, and that will be that. So I think that's our dream. So I still, at the age of 70, have this dream. So I've switched from CRM to information management in ecosystems, and its delivery in health and transport and so on. And I'm having a ball. And I am starting to get industry listening to me. I don't know whether I'll come up with a theory, but I'm certainly, at least I've already asked that question. What about the customer? And are you stupid, Transport for London, trying to get people to move more when you know your problem is they need to move less? That question alone could be worth millions to them, and it's being asked coherently, because we know the data. London's growing very fast. It's a very young city. The Elizabeth line extra capacity will be wiped out within 3 years by growth in demand. So they need to stop traffic, and that means massive increase in pedestrianisation instead of that tiny little sliver of Oxford Street that they're going to do. Do you follow? So, but you must aspire to it, and you can't just do lots of tiny studies, often on students, God forbid. You've got to think about what you want to do. And the big guys do it. Sorry, over to you.
No, go ahead.
May I say something? On just a small note? Because running many studies, now the small is another story, is a very good way to... Yeah, sorry. Because you're saying that we shouldn't... maybe it's not a very good idea to run many small studies and focus on the dream. I partially agree with that, but maybe the best way would be somehow to have a combination of both. Because in order to come up with a new theory, then you practically need many studies verifying your results, so you'll be able to generalize and create a theory.
You don't need to do the studies. You need to look at studies and think about the different. That's another route which scientists do a lot.
Can I add in this one? I agree with you. But at the same time, look at these young academics who had started off their career, how they will survive, how they will sustain in academic world, where the publication is the only or the main requirements. Unless you do consistently and constantly, you will not excel. You will not even, in fact, exist in academic world. Universities will push you out one way or other. So obviously, here is a very, very sensitive issue of pursuing your own interest and passion and everything, and also doing something that is that helps them to exist in academic world.
I'll give a controversial answer. How do you expect to contribute to industry without ever having worked in it? Yeah. This is what shocks me now. The standard route is doctorate straight into that. You know, I worked at IBM for years. I worked in the engineering industry. I worked at Xerox, and therefore I know what industry is. And I've been a consultant for half of my life working in industry. Big issue. Can I just pass it over and I'll come back to you? Big issue.
I think if you look at the way we work, our minds work, so sometimes you can trigger a new research by looking at the research gaps. So you read at the literature review, and this is what typically we do. And we are very good at. So for example, we will look at the literature, we will look at research gaps. We may produce another very good quality research, which may be very good for knowledge generation, but it may not be very good in terms of impact on the industry, for example. But another way I found after sort of working in academia is to actually work with an industry partner and look into the issues they are facing, for example. So that way, if you work, because you're right from beginning, everything you're doing is based on what the industry expects. So for example, looking at, in my personal experience, I worked with Islamic finance. So looking at what the industry was facing, the problems they were facing in the UK, and what sort of problems they were experiencing, what sort of solutions we can offer, that led to 2 PhD projects under my supervision at Cardiff. And I sort of immensely sort of enjoyed it. And also I'm sort of now at a stage where I can think about writing an impact case. So I think taking a different route and opening up your mind to other possibilities would help academia, because the typical sort of mindset is you look at literature gap, look at some websites as well. Sometimes they look like, in my area, they say go to academic marketing and look at the more hot topics, for example. And then the tendency is you just do another piece of work which will be published, it will be shelved. So opening up your mind and working with some industry helps. It's my experience.
I think I agree with Merlin and Ahmed, but I also feel, having experienced it, I think quite a lot of the cards are stacked against you, because the situation is that we have this thing called departments, and we have this thing called disciplines, and people say, well, you know, you're doing marketing, you've really got to focus on this area. And you say, well, I'm actually doing marketing and IT, I'm working with the School of Computing, I'm introducing a games degree. It's all very well, but, you know, we poo-poo this, it's not, you know, you're not actually doing something which is focused in a particular area. And this is a serious problem, because if you want to think outside the box, you've actually got to go multidisciplinary, like you are doing now. Mm-hmm. And that's where you're breaking new ground. But a lot of journals, they'll say, well, okay, and they can be very highly rated, but, oh, it's not in our area. So it's useless for ref. Do you see what I mean? So there are these problems. And I think universities bring it on themselves, to be honest.
I can just say, in my case, it was deliberately triggered partly because Ref Unit 34, which is a hodgepodge unit of media studies and culture and information management, we identified as a relatively weak area where the impact case studies were weak. And because I'd been working on customer information virtually all my life, I switched slowly but surely, and suddenly I realised that this was a very fertile area. So the chances of getting an impact case study accepted is much higher in that than in the management one. Well, we'll see, but anyway, that's our judgment, you know, so but it's an important one. But the other thing I was going to say is, if you find when you've written an article, when you come to the management implications, that effectively what you're writing is managers should read this and implement it, then you failed. Because it means you don't know what managers are reading and understanding, and all you're doing is saying they should read your stuff. That's a real, and it happens again and again. Look at them. It's awful. So read the grey literature. Read what McKinsey is saying. Read what Accenture is saying about your area. Read all the deep studies that are done. PwC did a study of impact, and they said effectively impact for academics was citations, and that meant zero impact. Impact is about industry looking at your stuff and implementing it. And you can point to lots of cases. The business model one is my best example of it. But lots of the language of businesses has come from academia, but we kind of forget about that and don't build on it. We just go on and do another small study. Don't know if anybody's got to add to that.
I think the only thing I would add is having worked for Software Alliance Wales in one of my previous roles at the university, I know a lot of other departments run sort of hackathon style events where they encourage a lot of it tends to be more sort of tech companies. I know the computer science department sort of collaborate with places like Tech Hub to sort of brainstorm ideas for new apps or research projects. So I don't know whether similar sort of activity takes place in this sort of in this kind of research field. Whether that might help.
Yeah, Tim Hughes at the University of West of England does his similar stuff with lots of agencies, advertising agencies, looking at co-creation and so on. That it's not hackathon, but it's close to it. So a deciding what you want to contribute and then who your constituency is and then involving them and putting on events that they'll benefit from is obviously a good start point, which is effectively what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah.
There's a question from online audience.
I've just had just going back a little bit here, I've just had a question in from someone online, which is someone could answer just quickly. It's the digital manager for Bosch. Somebody mentioned a paper relating to Bosch. She would like to know what that paper is, please, because she'd like to have a look at it.
It's public domain. It's on Transport for London. It was published in the spring edition of The Bottom Line. But the guy who's leading the research unit for Bosch was the one that contacted me, but she should just email me because I think there's kind of private stuff to be discussed and not in public. So she just emailed me at merlin-stone.com and then I'll tell her more about it. Okay.
It's actually touching upon what Professor Merlin said, but I would like to address my question to Dr. Ahmad, because Professor Merlin mentioned that we have to read like Accenture and McKinsey, etc. Looking at those reports, I haven't seen one presentation today, unfortunately, but that might be the future, on the demographic change, especially in the Western world. Because if we look, as you correctly mentioned earlier in your introduction, if we look at the demographics, in the large cities, the ratio of majority to minority will be reversed. It will be minorities who are the majorities in cities like London, Manchester, etc. Frankfurt, Amsterdam, these are just a couple of examples. So, and more specifically, even in the UK, if we take Wales, and I would like to address that after Dr. Ahmad to the council, even in Wales, they have the problem to connect with the Welsh abroad, which are ethnic minorities in countries like Brazil, Canada, US, etc. Although the Irish are very well connected with their ethnic minority communities. So we are talking about identification within culture as well. And I would like to know what is the future in terms of digital marketing? How can we contribute in knowledge and implications for practice, please?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very valid question because one of the key challenge, as I discussed earlier on, is the change in demographics. So there is, I would request everybody to look into for that report. There is it's a report by Nelson. And if you look at that report, it already talks about significant changes in America. For example, there are some states where the minority taken together is majority, and they call it the new majority. And I think you find similar trend across the Western world, in the UK, in Europe, even in Australia, for example. So first of all, the challenge is that there is very little academic research in the context of digital marketing. So there is some research in terms of social media use, for example, but it's not in the context of UK or Europe, for example. So we need more knowledge. We need more research into how these communities connect. We know for sure that they have more mobile phone usage, for example. They're more techno-friendly, for example, particularly the young generation. And they have a very positive outlook as well. They want to contribute, they want to create value. And they have a very positive, they're very brand conscious, they're very quality conscious as well. So they're looking out, they want to connect with the mainstream. Whereas the mainstream brands and marketers, unfortunately, you will find they are very laid back. So they're not coming forward. They have this kind of fear as well, which is well understood because you have this dilemma about how do you market to both minorities and mainstream without actually disturbing one or the other. But I think digital marketing techniques and tools allow marketers to tailor-make communications as well and target those communities. But I think we need more research into the communities and how do they, that's what I was saying, we need more insights into the cultural mindset. And that's what the Nelson Market Report talks about as well. We need to have more insights into how these communities work, what are the psychological and cultural mechanisms which these communities give preference to, because the sort of work you do, for example, in terms of digital marketing and all sorts of networking you do, but if you're targeting a very diverse, culturally diverse community, then obviously we need to know whether my message will be effective, whether I need to use what type of models I need to use, whether I need to adapt or use a mainstream message, for example. Luckily, there is research in an offline context. So they've done research on media, on advertising, on role of language, networking as well, because most of these minority communities are collectivist in nature. So they have the tendency to connect. They have tendency to word of mouth, for example. So they're very great in terms of connecting with other and spreading the news, for example. But we don't have much academic research, and this is where I think we can help and move the agenda forward by having more academic research, but also working with the industry partners, looking at, because certain brands, they are very tailored towards minority communities and they're very actually geared up. And I remember a quote from McDonald's, for example, from America, his marketing director quote, saying that they actually use the insights. They find that what the minority communities are doing, they become the mainstream trend. And it's a very interesting phenomena. So whatever the youth within the minority communities do, later on it becomes a trendy trend for the mainstream, for example. So why can't we actually use that insight to develop a strategy which will help me to actually target my mainstream consumer even better? So we can be more innovative, I think. But at the moment we have this sort of reluctance to engage, and we understand the political issues, and migration is a big discussion point, and sometimes people feel afraid of talking about it, but I think this is the reality.
I'm going to ask the industry guys in a minute, but obviously Transport for London knows London is only now 53% white. It's growing very fast, and it's half of the new births are to women who are not born in the UK. And it's a young city as a result, which is good news for London. So they have a pretty good picture of the ethnic variations. They're helped, of course, by UCL's work on ethnicity, which has produced a very good map of ethnicity in London, which is probably better than in most cities. But I think the answer is that in many cases, the commercial guys are already on top of this because they know that if they don't, they're going to lose half their market. British Airways was working on this 20 years ago because of their passenger base. But let me ask the industry guys first and see whether the question makes sense to them.
Well, from a tourism perspective, obviously our target audience is quite broad, really, because anyone on the planet potentially is a visitor to Swansea. So it'd be very difficult to tailor our content for specific sort of ethnicities and languages. But what we do is, say for instance, there's a big event, for instance, when Wales were in the Euros and doing so well, capitalising on that sort of higher profile of the country by targeting those areas with adverts in their native language, sort of AdWords and Twitter and Facebook adverts. And similarly, when Cardiff were hosting the Champions League final, targeting the cities of the teams involved in the final in their native language. So we tend to do it on a sort of campaign-based, on a campaign basis rather than sort of tailoring all our content for different sort of audiences. So if there was an automated way of doing that, that'd be fantastic.
Well, you have everybody in the UK as your customer.
We do indeed. Actually, I'm going to build on 2 points. One was what Chris mentioned earlier around the hackathon, which is a really useful way of getting some insights. And also what Professor Merlin said in terms of a colleague you worked with at the University of West England, was it? Working on collaboration with agencies. Now, when I work with agencies, one thing that I find incredibly useful is that they work with a whole range of different organisations in different industry verticals, and some of the actionable insights that they glean are probably something they wouldn't publish necessarily because it's got commercial value to it in its own right. But working with them, you through this kind of whole experience that you're having, this osmosis, you will also find out what is working and what the trend is. So for us, in particular, and in fact, I'll draw a parallel back to when I worked in the education space, but in a marketing role, not an academia role. And the collateral which I was producing, it was incredibly necessary for us to produce content that aligned to the needs of a customer, and we've mentioned a few times. So a student from, or potential student from China, for example, varies greatly to a potential student from the Middle East. And what the student perceives to be of interest is very different to the parent or the agent or the sponsor. So to have content that is a one-size-fits-all is going to fail. Having content that is targeted and tailored specifically to that audience works really well. So when I was doing that, I wasn't necessarily thinking about that diversity that you touched on, but it was more about this is the customer that I need to reach, and I would just curate the content to align to their needs. So that would have been my approach from a commercial angle.
So you had something I think you wanted to say?
Maybe.
Just wait a second.
Yeah, just
get the mic back.
Very small. What Professor Merlin said. You said that industry is already touching upon these things and they are doing very good. I partly disagree. I'm very sorry. Because we have a lot of examples of industry marketers who try to reach ethnic minorities and they fail very, very badly because they do not understand the ethnic minorities.
I don't disagree. I was going to give you a very good example of that failure.
Okay. Thank you.
We had, I was supervising a Saudi student. It was a master's dissertation, and she was very observant. She wore the niqab, but she'd done a really good study of online marketing of fashion, and her finding was that the Western companies were hopeless, because they were marketing standard stuff, and as an observant Muslim, they didn't understand the difference between indoor and outdoor fashion, and the fact that even indoors, her mother-in-law was looking at her. And therefore, what she'd do is to buy 2 of everything and then cut up the second one and stitch it to the first one to lengthen the sleeves and the skirt length. This was, and yet the Western companies were marketing online to Saudi stuff with very, very short sleeves and very, very short skirts. It was a terrible gap. And so I agree with you. I mean, I think this kind of thing is stupid, and it should be like chapter 1 of a marketing textbook. Understand your customer. But you're right. So I wasn't claiming it was good. I was just saying, there are bits that are not very good. Anyway, I think we're finished. So, any final remarks? I think I've talked far too much. So not from me. I think. Everybody happy? I think. The future of digital marketing. Lots more of it.
coffee.
Good. The future of digital marketing is coffee.
In 2 sentences each, coffee.
Lots more coffee. No. I'm not saying anything more.
Digital marketing.
I just think that keep an eye on the technology, keep an eye on the environment, and keep an eye on people. That's what's important.
In my opinion, mass customization in terms of understanding demographics, different cultures, different behaviors, and different perceptions in a more globalized world.
I'll just say, when your house talks to you much more than just Alexa, then we've reached where we want to get to.
I think user engagement and better sort of ideas into how can you enhance the user experience. That would help.
It's probably a bit of a cliche, but in my opinion, I think the quality of the content is key. So sort of providing a variety of different types of content, video, 360 video, things that, produce engagement, really.
For me, it's probably a state of utopia where digital marketing just blends right through to all that we do, rather than being given this title of digital marketing. It's part of the fabric of marketing.
Yeah, we're trying to ban it.
Yeah.
One final thing I will say, because I didn't say, content, the blend between creativity and content and digital hasn't really been touched. So we are seeing the beginning of that, but it's also user created. So there's this new card company that competes with Moonpig, where you upload your designs for other people to do. So it's like the Uber of card design, where the content is coming from the users. A bit like the fashion example that we saw earlier. That, to me, is also part of the contribution of digital marketing. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we thank all our panelists as well as discussant? It was really lively, and I'm sure audience would agree that it was quite useful as well. We disagree, agree, that's a different thing. But I guess we have had some perspectives on the topic, and time gone very fast. So thank you so much, all panelists here. Thank you. Thank you, discussant. Very helpful. Thank you.
I'm going to say, not gonna, yeah.
So we have coffee break, and then we'll come back for the
Okay, all right. Good afternoon, everybody. So this paper summarises the early stages of research that I'm doing with my colleague Geraint Evans, who's sitting at the back somewhere, and Eleni Aravopoulou, who is my research partner in all the work that we do at St Mary's. And we're looking at the difficult issue of platforms and ecosystems as they serve the customer in two particular public sector areas, both of which involve the private sector extensively. One is city congestion, and the other is housing and health. Okay. We'll start. You mean you want me to start again in 2 minutes? Okay. Do I start? Okay. My apologies for those of you who can't see the presentation. You can always write to me afterwards for it. So this summarises the early stages of work that I'm doing together with my colleague Geraint Evans, who's in the room, and Eleni Aravopoulou, who works with me on all my research, in relation to the role of B2B and B2C as they're connected by information platforms. And we're applying it to a particular couple of areas. One is smart cities, mobility, and so on, and the other is the area of health and social care. The first is based upon my work with Transport for London and certain other transport operations, and also with Amazon Web Services. And the second is based upon work that I started originally for the retirement housing company, McCarthy & Stone, and that developed into a wider research project. It's a bit of a hodgepodge of sources, qualitative, lots of interviews with managers, and also lots of research of both the academic and the grey literature to produce some conclusions about what is appropriate in terms of development in these areas. It's very much a conceptual paper that we're working on, but supported by case studies, and it casts a very clear eye over into the world of digital marketing as currently executed and planned by the private sector, to examine how these developments can be used to solve problems of customer experience in city congestion and housing and healthcare. And it contrasts the examples, the case studies, with the private sector, where customer experience has changed quite radically. So the example of Netflix would be one in terms of what people are able to achieve. I don't know if anybody didn't see the article in The Economist on Netflix 2 weeks ago, you should read it. It's now responsible for 20% of the world's downloading of streaming video, and that's a revolution on anybody's measure. I think the best thing to convey what we're doing is to give you two examples. The first of which is healthcare, back to the problem that is experienced mostly in Europe and also North America of a rapidly aging population. Interestingly, not so rapid in the UK because of our substantial inward migration for the last 20 years, which has led to a big boost in the younger population, because most of the inward migrants were of childbearing age and they had their children. So in particular, London is a very young city relative to Western Europe as a result. But nonetheless, we have in absolute number terms, a very large number of aging people, and they are extraordinarily expensive to manage. The healthcare costs have what they call the bathtub effect. So you cost a lot at the beginning and a lot at the end, but unless you're unfortunate, not much in between. But the end now lasts for 20 to 25 years as you gradually acquire one or more of the long-lasting but not terminal diseases, heart, lung, musculoskeletal, cancer, or brain degeneration. So one of the biggest causes of cost is a fall. So an old person falls and costs go through the roof. Bones are broken, hospitalization for a substantial period. And one of the biggest causes of fall is dehydration. So we have a simple scenario which says an old person wakes up and Alexa, or whoever is your favorite in this respect, says, don't get up, drink the glass of water beside you that we told you to prepare last night, and then wait for 20 minutes while your body rehydrates. Obviously, to achieve that requires a big information system behind it, because you don't want to tell everybody to have a glass of water. You can imagine the information platform that has to lie behind that. In transport, our case study is one that I've mentioned already, which is you wake up in the morning and Alexa or whoever says, don't go to work. Your route to work is messed up, and your whole work group has been permissioned by your employer to stay at home and do their call on, should we call it Amazon Chime or Microsoft Skype or whatever. And it's not worth going to work today, or delay it for 3 hours, because our forecast is that the maintenance that is needed now because of the failure in the system that caused your journey to work to be so difficult will be completed within 3 hours. So these are two simple examples, both of which require massive information platforms and agreement by all the stakeholders that they're going to work together to achieve something that is better. The problem is that there's a big contrast, and I'm not sure you won't be able to see this. So this is the data ecosystem in public transport. And you can see that the five big rectangles are public and NGO stakeholders, top left, information systems, services and data providers on the top right, frontline stakeholders, logistics providers, health and emergency services, utilities, bottom left, in the middle, customers, us, and who are usually neglected, as I pointed out earlier, and on the right, delivery not in the sense of logistics, but the people who deliver whatever it is. In other words, they're the service operators. And I have a similar map for the health and care ecosystem. I can't quite remember why I chose to have one in colour and one not, but perhaps I was trying to be cheerful about health. The big contrast between the two is glaring, because in the first, there's a commitment to open data, and in the second, the data is closed. And in particular in the UK, where we have a National Health Service, I dare call it an ecosystem, a system which denies access and treats the data not as if it's the customers or the patients, but as if it belongs to the health service. It's not going to happen until the health service opens up its data to other providers, in the same way that, for example, the London Data Store, the Open Data Store, has been opened up through APIs to all the app providers. So in the article that I did on London Transport, which was mentioned earlier, you can see the number of app providers who are using it. Something like, I think, over, I can't remember the exact figure, 50 to 60% of transport inquiries are through third-party apps, not through an app produced by London Transport. It's not perfect, but it works. And the savings to people who now can see when their bus is coming is very, very important. So what we're trying to do is to exercise the role of the academic, which is to say, listen, you've got a big problem, and in health, the problem is not only a structural one, which we know about, which economists will tell you about having a unitary delivery and financing authority compared to the public sector insurer and the public sector deliverer, which you have in the rest of Europe, which leads to substantially lower illness rates, which because you've got a funder that can challenge the provider, but also they're using the data that the funder requires to have from the provider. In the UK, the Health and Social Care Information Centre up in Leeds serves only the health service and the minister and doesn't act properly. I mean, it does do public data provision, but not enough. So the result of the conclusion of our article is going to be that if you're going to use digital techniques to solve big social problems, you need to go the open data route, and you need to learn from the private sector, not necessarily the open route, because often the private sector ecosystem has at its centre a closed set of data, but the enormous partnering with third parties that takes place in the private sector that has determined the success of whether it's a Google or an Amazon or whatever. So this is a big conclusion. Our other work looks at, related to the cloud platform ecosystem in marketing, because obviously as a marketing academic, I'm often looking at the marketing learning and seeing how that applies to the two core case studies, but not exclusively. So part of the work that we've got to do is to look hard at the ecosystem in marketing and the flow of data within the system that needs to happen for the end result to be generated. And that's why I put this diagram here. The implications, I think, are very clear. Big implications for providers of health, social care, transport, whether they be public or private, and for government particularly. Government basically doesn't get it, thinks that progress in this area is a result of small innovation challenges, not moves by giants. And that's despite the fact that Amazon Web Services hosts Transport for London data, the DVLA data here, the Passport Office data, and Ministry of Defence data. So they're kind of ignoring the fact that in order to achieve innovation in this area, you need giants helping you with the management of your data. And one of the reasons for that is that the capacity required to deal with the kind of data that needs to support the cases that I mentioned is enormous. So you need to have lots and lots of spare capacity. So when a transport system goes wrong, the volumes of inquiries go through the roof, and guess who's providing the data storage to support them? It's Amazon Web Services. And finally, of course, down at the bottom, this has important implications for how we teach these subjects. We can't sensibly teach about information management in health and transport to a student without explaining some of this background. It's not about little bits of database and little apps. This is serious, heavyweight stuff. We have a lot of work to do on the paper that we've tabled. I can't remember whether you've got access to it. We're already way over length, and we've just sketched out our stuff. We've got a lot of work to do on referencing and ecosystem stuff, and a lot more work on the digital marketing information maps. And as per my earlier comments, much deeper investigation of the implications for theory and practice in digital marketing and management and innovation theory, which seems to a lot of innovation theory doesn't really take into account this kind of innovation. So there we go. That's my presentation. Any questions? Do we have time for questions? I'm chairman, so I should say yes, shouldn't I? Yeah, okay. We have time for questions. Yeah.
One thing is
Do you want the mic? Do you need the mic? Or?
I'm all right. I'm okay. So I was saying, when you're actually going to do this research, is that whole lack of open data going to be a real problem to try and?
Well, we're not going to try and do the work in the sense that we know that it's closed.
Yeah. Okay.
And therefore, that's the key knowledge. So when we look at the health scenario, we're going to be pointing the finger, if you like, and saying what works in, and of course it's not perfect, what works in the smart city, and it's not, of course, just in the UK, by the way, in the best smart cities in the world, has to work in health but can't. What's the barrier? It's the closeness of the information between the several providers, particularly care on the one hand and health on the other. Yes, in my dreams, I have a research program which involves going to talk to them, but I don't have time for that in the current ref cycle. I want to kind of put a bomb under the public health data debate, and all I need is the closure and the fact you can find there's no data store online that you can go to. The London data store is online. That's all the evidence I need. I want to point out the consequences of that for healthcare, and that I've got enough knowledge to do. But I have friends I can talk to, yes. Yeah. Any more questions before we go on to our next presenter? Okay. Right, well, the next presenter is virtual, so we can take a break for a couple of minutes, I think.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to participate in this workshop. My name is Juana Mari Padilla from Universidad Católica San Antonio, Spain. 10 years ago, I could never have imagined that the arrival of smartphones and the mobile application could revolutionize our lives and the industry so much. Look to your left. Now look to your right. One of your seatmates will use Android operating system or perhaps iOS. Furthermore, over 90% of you are going to use at least one or more apps during this talk. And for this reason, I'm going to speak about the importance of App Store optimization, Azure for hospitality application. I've divided my presentation into 5 sections: introduction, objectives and hypotheses, methodology, results and conclusion. The advent of the internet and the development of mobile devices has changed the way the hotel product is promoted, sold and distributed. Efficient app management can improve user loyalty to the brand, and any digital strategy should consider what factor to implement to optimize the positioning of apps in a highly competitive universe. The first objective is to make known what factor, whether internal or external, should be implemented to gain visibility in app stores. The second objective is identify the best practices carried out by large hotel chains in optimizing their apps. Finally, the outcome of this project is to suggest hotel owners and developers what features need to be implemented to improve their visibility and at the same time provide researchers with more information of a new subject. To support the above objectives, we have studied several hypotheses for both platforms, Android and iOS. Hypothesis H1. Beta's optimization is related to a better positioning in the ranking of hotel apps. H2. The better the optimization of an app, the higher its conversion rate, only Android. H3. The name of an app influences the positioning in the ranking of hotel apps. H4. The description of the app influences the positioning, only Android. H5. The name of the developer influences the positioning, only Android. H6. The subtitle of the app influences the positioning in the ranking of hotel apps, only iOS. H7. The keyword of the app influences the positioning in the ranking of hotel apps, only iOS. The next thing I would like to talk about is the methodology. This work is an exploratory study, fieldwork, and qualitative and quantitative analysis of the hotel sector. Let's look now at this table, where we can resume how the study has been developed. Sector analysis, hospitality sector. Population, universe, mobile application of the main hotel chains located in Spain. Sample 41 apps from Google Play Store and 44 from iTunes Store. Study period December 12, 2016, December 12, 2017. Variable analysis, ASO on-off metadata. We have used the ASO Handbook of IAP Spain 2017 to study the ASO factors, and as well we have added several parameters as annual average. This variable measures the average position that the app has reached through the year in the store. As this variable has been calculated by the AppTweet.com application, which performs ASO analysis, and the score refers to the degree of optimization of the app. Once the other parameters have been analyzed, ASO percent refers to the previous variable but in percentage. National, international. This parameter refers to the origin of the hotel group. Single brand or multi-brand indicates whether the hotel group has only one brand or several brands. Hotel group list on the stock exchange. ASO internal on metadata and external of metadata. Informer programmer can modify to better position the app within the store, and in the latter are those that cannot be controlled directly. As you can see, this table represents the ASO main factors. On page, on metadata, factors are title, description, keywords, only iOS, icon, category, screenshots, video, only Android, Google Plus, only Android. Of metadata or of page factor are total downloads, rating, reviews, updates, usage rate, link building, and so on. Now we come to the study results. All the data analysis were carried out with the statistical software SPSS for Windows and Excel spreadsheets. To measure the different parameters, currently various applications such as AppTweet.com and Apani were used. According to the ASO manual, there are a number of parameters that affect the positioning of an app in the application store. Following this manual, we propose that in order to carry out the analysis, the normality of the variable is first checked in order to decide on the most appropriate statistical test for available data. We started studying the correlation. We have parametric in normal distribution, and we will use the Pearson's correlation and the student's t-distribution. For no parametric, if residuals are not normal, we will use the Spearman's correlation. For Android hypothesis, as we can see in the table, in H2, the hypothesis is supported because a Spearman correlation is positive in both. The significance is 0.001. In H3, the hypothesis is supported because the significance, the student's t-distribution, is less than 0.05. For iOS hypothesis, as we can see in the table, in H1, a hypothesis is supported because Pearson's correlation significance is p less than 0.05. In each H6, the hypothesis is supported because the significance of the student's t-distribution is p less than 0.05. Conclusion. I would like to conclude by saying that this project could help app owner and web developer to establish which factor influence the correct optimization of an app that allows them to increase their visibility in the different markets. Researched in a subject that, due to its complexity, still has little literature, and small hotel chains to give them some minimum guidelines to improve their digital strategy and increase their visibility in the main app stores.
Okay, are there any questions? So we're quite pressed for time. Any questions? Before we go on to the next.
Hello everyone, thank you for giving us this opportunity to present our work in front of you. Topic of our today's presentation is 3 new perspectives of grey sheep behavior in e-commerce recommendations across different domain, context and items. Agenda will be, first we'll talk about background and literature review of recommender system, then the research gaps identified and formal research questions, then the methodology adopted, and then results and contributions of this work. Recommender systems are systems that predict the level of preference of a given item by a user and are used to provide a list of recommended items a user might be interested in. Primarily, they are an information filtering mechanism and are widely used for cross-selling, upselling, and to increase customer loyalty by e-commerce companies. Once you see them, you'll find that they are almost everywhere present today, and personalization is one of the central concepts of recommender systems. There are 2 approaches for online recommendations. One is content-based approach, which makes recommendation to a user by analyzing the descriptions of the product. And then there is a collaborative filtering approach, which is based on the assumption that if 2 individuals A and B like similar items or give similar ratings to n items, then they will do similarly for other items too. Currently, collaborative filtering is one of the most widely used and most successful approach for recommendations. At the heart of collaborative filtering recommendation approach is a utility matrix. As you can see over here, we have a 5 users and 6 items utility matrix. User 1 has given 3 stars in the scale of 1 to 5 to item 1. And user 1 has not given any ratings to item 5 and item 6 and even to item 3. And we might be interested to find among these item 3, item 5 and item 6, which item user 1 might like most. And that is the item which we will recommend it to him or her. Cosine similarity is one of the most popularly used similarity calculation method. And once the neighborhood set of similar users to an active user, that is for user to whom recommendations are to be made, are calculated, a prediction formula which uses a weighted average of the ratings is used to find the rating that particular user will give to the unknown or unrated items. Transfer learning is a machine learning paradigm which basically uses the knowledge gained in solving one task in one domain to solve another task in another domain. It is motivated by the fact that people can intelligently apply knowledge learned previously to solve new problems faster or with better solutions. Similar approach is being done in machine learning and particularly in recommender systems. Context-aware recommender systems. Context is any information that can be used to characterize the situation of entities. In case of recommender systems, the context information such as the mood of the user, the day of the week, location, they can be used to make more efficient and more precise recommendation to the user depending on their context. Cross-domain recommender system, there could be dependencies and correlation between the preferences in different domains. And instead of treating each type of items independently, user knowledge acquired in one domain could be transferred and exploited in other domains. In cross-domain recommender system, there are 4 types of domain levels which have been defined. One is attribute level, which is primarily for the same kind of item but different attributes. For example, movies have different genres, comedy movie and thriller movies. Type level are basically for items which share some attributes. For example, movies can be also comedy and books can be also comedy or thriller. In item level domains, basically items don't share much of the attributes for books, for example, books and movies. System level domains, they are basically maintained by 2 different companies or 2 different entities. In recommender system, there exists a special kind of user called grey sheep users, and they have very eccentric traits and have a very partial or very low correlation coefficient with other or with almost all the rest of the users. These grey sheep users themselves don't benefit much from the system, but their presence also diminishes the quality of recommendations which are made to rest of the users in the system. Therefore, identification of grey sheep is important to improve the quality of recommendation for the remaining users of the system. These are the 3 research gaps. No work previously have been done to explore the behavior of grey sheep users in different domains, in different contexts. Similarly, just like grey sheep users, no one has previously studied that can items be grey sheep too? That is, if we remove certain items from the system, the efficiency of recommendation, overall recommendation might increase. These are the 3 research questions. Formal research question: is the grey sheep behavior unique to individual domain or is consistent across domains? Is the grey sheep behavior unique to a specific context or is consistent across different contexts? Do items exhibit grey sheep behavior? We have adopted a state-of-the-art social networking approach for grey sheep identification. We have used publicly available datasets. For type level and item level, Amazon.com movie review dataset have been used. For type level, movie and books. For item level, books and movies. For grey sheep item identification, we have used again Amazon.com movie review dataset. For context-aware recommender system, we don't have any publicly available commercial dataset. There exists one experimental dataset that has been created by previous users, specifically for recommender system, that is known as Aldos Komoda movie dataset, and we have also used the same dataset for our research. Now we'll talk about the results. In cross-domain recommender system, firstly the type level, that is books and movies, we found that 12 out of 30 users who were grey sheep in books were also grey sheep in movies. That is, almost 1/3 of the users who were grey sheep in one domain were also grey sheep in another domain. However, for item level domain, we find that only 2 out of 36 grey sheep users in book domain were also grey sheep in music domain. And 2 out of 45 users who were grey sheep in music were grey sheep in book domain. Hence, like in contrast with type level domain, grey sheep behavior is not shared that predominantly between item level domains. In context-aware recommender system for grey sheep behavior, we use moods. So there were 3 moods: positive, neutral, and negative. We found that total of 24 users were found to be grey sheep when mood was positive, 19 were found grey sheep when the mood was neutral, and only 2 users were classified as grey sheep users when the mood was negative. Among the identified grey sheep users, only 1 was common between positive and neutral context of mood, and 1 was found to be common between neutral and negative context. This implies that grey sheep behavior is dependent on the context, and for each context, the grey sheep user should be identified separately. For grey sheep item, we found that if we removed 6 items from the overall data set, we found that there was a decrease in MAE from 0.8296 to 0.8164, and also decrease in RMSE value from 1.191 to 1.163. This decrease in MAE and RMC value indicate that the quality of recommendation has increased. Thus, there do exist some items which we may call as grey sheep items, and their removal from the system increases the overall efficiency of the recommender system. So these are the three primary contributions of this work. For the first time, grey sheep behavior has been studied in cross-domain recommender system, and this can help in devising more efficient recommendation of precision strategies. Secondly, in context-aware recommender system, we have given insights about the grey sheep behavior. And thirdly, and more importantly, the idea of grey sheep item has been introduced for the first time in recommender system literature, and their existence has been also empirically demonstrated. It provides a theoretical foundation to query further on the issues related to the unique attributes or the features of the grey sheep item. And this is more relevant, especially as the value-aware recommendations is also becoming more and more popular. Thank you. And now, any questions and suggestions for this work?
Individual questions? No questions? Okay, we'll move straight on to the next presentation then.
Hello folks, this is Raed Al-Ghurabat, an Associate Professor of Digital Marketing and Social Media from the University of Jordan, Amman, Jordan. With my co-authors, Dr. Rana, Dr. Ali Alwan, and Dr. Abdullah Abdullah and Dr. Yugesh. We are presenting now our paper entitled as Investigating Impact of Social Media Commerce Constructs on Social Trust and Customer Value Co-Creation. And this is a theoretical analysis. In reality, in the Middle East area, in particular in Jordan, the use of social media commerce has been increased recently. So many of our customers and participants are liking to use social media in order to go further and do their purchase and investigating more information about the products and different brands available there. So basically, the main theme of this paper is to investigate how actually social commerce constructs can be linked with the social trust, which in turn impact actually customer value co-creation. So far within the literature, we have different and many gaps within linking and investigating the relationship between those different constructs. In particular, for the social commerce constructs, a body of knowledge has been published regarding this area. However, there is lack of agreement about what component should be included there. And as well for the social trust. So trust as a construct which could be measured and which could be conceptualized in different way within the online context. Lack of research actually has been investigated this particular construct, which is social commerce, or sorry, which is social trust. So also we have the construct of value co-creation, another construct which has been not defined and measured properly, because we have different theories within the customer value co-creation. Whether we're speaking about the website and how you can utilize it, how you can measure it within the website, or even within the social media platform. So different theories have been appeared to the service there. However, the main theme of this paper theoretically is to try to link three different constructs which have been actually discussed differently, and yet lack of empirical research or even theoretical research have been, I would say, linking or trying to find the linkage between these three constructs. So what we have done actually, we started our investigation by conducting more interviews within the Jordanian context, Middle East context in particular, in order to know more about what the different constructs illustrated in this paper mean for customers, for practitioners in particular. And after this, we went back to the literature. We tried to find the main items illustrated and which can explain those different constructs together. And based on this, actually, again, we conceptualized for the social commerce constructs being second order, and also for the value co-creation to be a second order, in an attempt to link social commerce constructs with social trust, which in turn impact value co-creation. So having said so, it seems that from the literature, the gap is there. And we still have a lack of, I would say, enough research which could create the linkage, or even which could explain how social commerce constructs might impact social commerce within the developing countries' context, and how this construct in return, I would say, could impact the value co-creation. So in order to do this, actually, we went back again, creating our own interviews, merging the interviews results with what has been done within the literature, which is, as I stated, very limited amount of research, if you like, aspected there. So based on this, we created again the conceptual model consisting of investigating the impact of social commerce constructs, second order, consisting of referrals and recommendations, ratings and review, forms and communities, linking it with the social trust, which in turn impact again the value co-creation as a second order. And we decided at this stage to define value co-creation as encapsulated in 3 different values, which many of the Middle East area customers using the social media platform are looking for, and those are functional value, hedonic value, and social value. So having said so, actually, we think that the current research, using the methodology of focusing on the social media platform to collect the data, we think that we will enrich the body of literature. In particular, we will have theoretical implications encapsulated in discovering the linkages between the social commerce constructs, second order, and social trust, and also the relationship between social trust and value co-creation, second order, in this stage. So basically, we think that we'll have the ability to investigate an area which hasn't been investigated, and we will have the ability to discover a path which is unexplored when so forth. And even for the managerial for the managerial contributions, we think that we will help practitioners in determining more about how to focus on what types and what items within the social commerce constructs to focus on, how to create, how to focus on social trust, and what role social trust would play in enhancing, I would say, social commerce constructs. And as a matter of fact, we all know that, in particular, people in the Middle East, they're going to social media platforms for seeking more fun, or even for getting more information, or even for appearing to their peers and their friends. So now another important aspect is to discover how social trust would impact the value co-creation, in particular encapsulated in functionality, hedonic, and the social values. So we are expecting that the linkages that we are trying to do here within our theoretical paper not only would enrich the literature related to the social media platforms, but also it would be helpful for practitioners to understand how things are linking together, how they can create their own branding strategy, how they can even focus on their social media strategies in order to attract more customers, segmenting their customers, trying to position the brands that they have properly in their customers' minds. And I hope that you will have a happy reading for our papers. Wishing you all the best. And this is a very warm welcoming from me and my co-authors all around the Middle East and the UK, and hoping you to have a happy conference there, and all my warm regards and wishes to everyone who's watching this video. Thank you indeed. Thank you.
All right. I think we're moving straight on because we don't really have time for questions, I think. So, Zainab, if you'd like to come up and carry on with the sharing. Thank you.
Hello again. This is going to be our final session. So, so we're going to have Samuel to start with, and then we're going to have physicians' resistance to mobile health service with Mr. Ashish, and finally we're going to have 2 virtual sessions. So let's welcome Samuel first. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Quickly, I know we kind of speeding up because of time. This research area is an ongoing research, and I'm looking at the UT-AUT2 model to understand the use of mobile banking and customer satisfaction in Nigeria. I've got quite a few colleagues that are interested in this work, and what I'm sharing with you today is just the thought of what we've actually seen so far. I'm putting it together, and I welcome your contributions and suggestions as well. Quickly, I'll go through the session, introduction, there will be the model, just talk about it briefly, the research problem, aim and objectives, what we've seen in literature so far, the design and methods we're taking, so just few implications for now. It's quite interesting looking at Nigeria as a country. Like I said, it's work in progress, but you would understand with me that a population of over 195 million, it's no joke. It's huge. As at 2016, the World Bank was saying is over 186. But this statistics we have from the United Nations is just the statistics as at today. A growing population, annual growth is about 2.6. 51% of the population lives in the urban area, and very vibrant young population as well, and very active online. And in 2011, we're told 28%, but it's arguable because already we have statistics from Gabon, much smaller, Kenya, and Sudan, and 50% are already using mobile phone in those countries. So we think, as of today, definitely more than half of the population. And we have more than 25 banks in operation, and the banks use mobile phone a lot, interacting with their customers, and customers also do transactions using their mobile phone. As we can understand, we much appreciate that in country like Nigeria, the broadband is not as it is in the West. So the mobile phone is almost a gateway to online, and they use a lot of the apps and the programs the banks provide through the phone. Now, just introducing the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology by Venkatesh, 2003. This was a research that I used during my PhD a few years ago, and really interesting to see how effort expectancy in terms of the advantage you might have for using the technology or accepting to use it. Is it easy, the effort? Or people that are important to you, what do they think about the technology? Or perhaps what are the resources there that kind of support the use of it? And then you see that relating directly to the behavioral intention to use, and then the actual use of it. And all these are actually moderated by factors such as gender, such age, experience, and of course, if it's compulsory or voluntary. Now, just looking at that, with Venkatesh Itel 2003, we're now going to Venkatesh Itel 2012. And of course, quite 3 other determinants, predictors have been added. And as you can see, there is the hedonic motivation. Is there a pleasure here? What kind of things do the user enjoy by actually accepting to use that technology? And for the case of mobile phone, we think that that is true, because the mobile phone is almost like a toy for a lot of young people. And for a country like Nigeria, with a growing population of young people, the pleasure they derive from using their phones to be able to check their bank balances, move transactions, find out where the nearest ATM is, transfer money to people just from their phone. The price, at some time, at a particular point in Nigeria, each time you use the ATM, you are charged for it until it became reformed. So there's always the issue of the costs of it, and of course, habit as well. So those were the 3 factors added that made it UTA UT2. And going forward, we'll be adopting that. Just quickly, because of our time, like I said, performance expectancy is one of those factors, predicting factors, effort expectancy, social influence, facilitating conditions. The additional construct, as I mentioned, is what we have in here. With the extended model, unlike the previous model, we think this extends more to the consumer rather than just the organization itself. So we found this UT2 to be appropriate to this research. The problem we have, quickly, is one, in marketing research, innovation and technology adoption, as far as the literature in Africa is concerned, from what we've seen, there are a lot of models that are not unified and a lot of theories that are untested. And as we've heard earlier today, it'd be good to use such models that are really verifiable, dependable models, and we found this model to be one of them. And one other thing we found as well is that we do have quantitative research that just conducts simple statistical analysis of mean, average, and without any theoretical base per se. That's what we found in a lot of the literatures that we've looked at in terms of previous studies that were reviewed. The nature of mobile adoption, and especially customer satisfaction, puts forward emotional, sentimental issues and rational cognitive perspectives. And we think that area has not been addressed from the previous research so far. We've looked at about 50 literature that borders around banking, use of mobile phone in Nigeria and in Africa as a whole. And on mobile adoption and customer satisfaction in Nigeria, we find that this approach is quite a novel one, and there is indeed a gap in the literature. And we've also seen a lot of methodological flaw, and hopefully we will be able to address that. Our aim is to conduct an in-depth systematic literature review that will provide empirical evidence for theory development of the impact of mobile banking adoption on customer satisfaction in Nigerian banks. So we think this will be of benefit not just to the bank, but to the customers and to academia. And what we've had today in a lot of research where the customer is actually missing. In this case, we are looking at academia, our research here, we are looking at the banks, and we're also looking at the customers as well. We'll survey individual bank customers, so we're going to approach the customers, and we'll also approach organizations that are customers. Because when we say customers, we're not just talking about individuals. We also see owners and managers of SMEs in Nigeria that use mobile phone for their businesses. And so we see those organizations as customers as well. Just going forward, we'll be looking at 500 customers from various states in Nigeria. We'll be looking at their response in addition to contacting the banks. My time is up, but quickly, this is what we found. Research conducted recently, and Africa, it's almost missing in there. And we think having 146 million mobile phone users in Nigeria, such research would be of relevance and will bring information to the world stage as well. These are some of the research we've also been able to review, and we've seen the gap, which we're going to address. And quickly, the design for our research, we're following Tahini et al. 2006, and also we are looking at Yaun et al. 2015 in terms of their use of UT-AUT and UTAUT2 model. Quickly, as I round up the implications, the study will be helpful to bank customers, to researchers, to managers, policymakers in Nigeria, and it will contribute to the literature in this aspect as well. We think it will bridge the gap of the methodology which we found, and I welcome your contributions, support, and questions, if any. Those are our references. Thank you very much for listening, and Dio Conval. Dio Conval.
As you said earlier that it's exploratory research, I was just wondering whether you validated your model yet with the data that you have gathered from 500 organizations, 500 individuals, including SMEs and individual customers. So whether you have, because I haven't seen the model, validated model.
No, we're saying that that's what we will do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my second question, related question is, like you said that you have gathered data from individual customers as well as also from the owners of SMEs and other organizations. So are you going to differentiate between these types of individual customers? Are you going to treat them equally, or the individual customers are going to be treated differently than the owner of SMEs and other organizations?
We look at the customers. Our intention is to look at the customers and to look at the customers as individuals that use the bank, and to look at customers as owners of businesses that use the bank. And so there will be indication on the questionnaire in terms of who they are, and when we get the result, we'll be able to differentiate. But we want to actually ask them similar questions. I want to treat the organization almost like their experience in terms of the manager acting on behalf of the business and interacting with the bank using the phone, and an individual using the phone. Definitely the results in terms of who they are will be separated, and we'll look at the relationship or commonalities between that, yes.
Have you also kept some monitors from UTAUT too, or it is just the simple model that you would like to go for?
I think in my previous research where I used the UTAUT, I looked at the age, I looked at even ethnicity, but in Nigerian context, I think we'll look at in terms of their location. We think it will be relevant. Definitely the age, the gender, that will stay from the model, definitely. But voluntariness of use will not be really of any point here, I think.
Anyway, yeah. So your basic model is UTAUT2, not UTAUT.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Dr. Ilyas, this is your area. Fire some. Yeah?
Yeah, actually I had a question. Sorry. So I understand that so the novelty is around running UTAUT2 in Nigeria, right?
Correct, yes.
So it's always interesting to run successful models on new markets, so that's important.
Thank you.
My first question is, because I'm not familiar with the field in the aspect. So there are no other studies doing something similar either for Nigeria or for other countries in Africa?
No. What we found is people have gone, they've done chi-square, they've gone mean average, they've got different form of statistics all over the place, but they've not used a particular model. The closest one we had talked about the innovation diffusion and just commented on it, but when it came to the analysis or data gathering, they didn't use the model. So that's what we found as a gap. Yeah.
Yes, there's a question. There's a question from online.
Yeah, but I would.
Oh, sorry, we're not. Sorry, beg your pardon.
The more interesting part.
Yeah.
So.
Can we do?
Yeah. So I see, at least as a reviewer, there are often come papers that they take existing models and they run an analysis, and what they write is that this has never been before. So that's my novelty. So the comment is a suggestion when you write your paper, is that you need to make strong the fact on why we need to focus on Nigeria, and why is Nigeria important, what makes it important. So this would read as a case study for Nigeria, and then focus on cultural aspects, for example, and then you can compare with similar findings either from other places, other countries in Africa, if there is something relevant, or other developing countries, and then you can make your paper quite strong to go to a good journal. Because just saying that someone hasn't done it before is not enough. You need to explain why, right?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. One of the strong points about Nigeria is the population and the number of users as well. So thank you very much. We'll take that on board. Thank you so much.
What was the question from the audience?
Do you want me to have a mic, or is it?
If we can just.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, sorry you can't see me, but I am here. Aneta online has asked that, she says that as an African using mobile apps for banking, she thinks that it's very risky and trust is a big issue. How is this research taken into account security issues?
Definitely part of our questions will cover that. One of the moderating variables with the Utah 2 is experience. And so previous research did highlight the risks involved. But I think mobile phone in Nigeria is quite unique because the registration of mobile phone and no mobile phones number attached to individuals, they go through very high security procedures to be able to get a mobile number. For instance, you have your fingerprints, you have your photo taken. It's quite serious. But here, for instance, in the UK, I go over to buy a mobile phone and I get a line. But to get a line in Nigeria, your fingerprint goes with a number. That is not to say that the risk is not there, but I think the government have done a lot, and that's why the banks are using it so much. So definitely there'll be issue of the experience and the risks involved. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Our next presentation is going to be Physicians' Resistance to Mobile Health Service Platforms, a Behavioral Reasoning Perspective, from Ashish Prakash and Sanjita Shnay. I'm sorry. Indian Institution of Technology, India. Thank you. Please.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be presenting on my paper that I co-authored with my research guide, Dr. Sangeeta Sahni. I'm working in the area of consumer resistance in the mobile health applications and electronic health applications as my PhD at Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. This is going to be the flow of presentation. Mobile technology is currently there has been a lot of literature regarding the IT in healthcare, and currently mobile technology is making its wave into the healthcare space after the quite successful online retail and all that. So one of the major arguments here is that the demand it can actually solve. Why they're pitching in is that they can actually solve, at least in the case of emerging markets, where you have a resource constraint. The health providers do not want to go to rural areas where they think they are marginalized and they don't have a proper life. So apart from that, people who push for these kind of reforms are expecting that it can make the healthcare more accessible, affordable, responsive. We are not talking in terms of completely replacing the traditional healthcare systems with the mobile health systems, but we are talking about enhancing the quality and the continuance of care, which is missing, which is probably one of the major aspects. So to give a quick definition, I found many definitions, but this was quite one of the best and short that is available. So when I talk about mHealth services, what I mean to say, it includes all these services which are provided, not just in the literature. You can see that literature talks about narrowly focusing on the mobile-based or the handset-based, but it is more to do with the mobile in terms of technology rather than mobile in terms of the handset. So you're familiar with the IoT devices and the remote devices which are streaming your vital data into the physician. So he can actually, the continuity of care is ensured. So the argument for mHealth in India is supported majorly by three major sets of factors. I have brought in some data from certain industry reports. But the first factor, the structural factor, there is an acute shortage of healthcare resources, especially in the rural India, which says there are only about 0.7 doctors for 1,000 population, while the World Health Recommendation says you need to have at least 1 per 1,000. And to exacerbate the situation, there is a skewed distribution towards the rural areas. You can see that about 70% of the health infrastructure in India is actually concentrated in top 20 cities, leaving the rest of the 70% population to quakery or practitioners who are not qualified. All these do happen in India. And one of the major aspects which I found is that even though there is a referral system, in India, the healthcare sector is operating in 3 tiers. And although there is a primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, the referral system doesn't operate well because people feel that they don't have to. They jump the levels and directly approach tertiary care system because they feel that the quality of care at the primary health centers are not so good. And the second aspect of it is the financial aspect, which is rising healthcare. Healthcare cost is everybody must be knowing. And one of the most important part here is that government doesn't spend much on the public. You can look at the figures. It is just 1.18% of GDP. And another important factor to be considered here is that 76% of the Indians are not covered under any insurance scheme. So everything goes out of their earnings. Then there are two specific trends when it comes to the behavioral aspect. One is that the surge in lifestyle diseases, which can be managed well by these kind of devices, because you don't need a continuous or emergency kind of care, which can be, your vital signals can be monitored remotely, and the disease can be managed. The second aspect is that the rise in number of tech-savvy customers. Currently we are the second largest market of smartphone market with 339 million users, and mobile internet traffic accounts for around 78% of the total internet traffic. And the things are improving since a lot of companies have introduced affordable smart devices and the data charges have slashed. And so this is what I'm talking about, mHealth in India. So a lot of ventures, but the key, I want to focus on certain mHealth platform, which I call, which is popularly these are the main players here, which offer similar kind of services like Practo, DocsApp, Liberate. They offer telemedicine capabilities as well as even though the business models are slightly different, but they offer more or less the same services: telemedicine, video consultation, text consultation. Then doctors can actually post their profile. You can rate the doctor. You can give a feedback. These kind of services, I would like to call them as mHealth platforms. Even the government is introducing, in line with the private sector initiatives, government is introducing a lot of reforms, but there is, you can see that since there are no large-scale success precedents in the Indian sector, the key stakeholders are unable to appreciate the value of such kind of initiative. And in the literature also says that adoption, such devices or such technologies, adoption and acceptance, because people look for evidences and approval from their provider when it comes to adopting these kind of technology. If the provider is not there, they are not ready to go online. Then health provider resistance is studied by 2007 paper, and especially in this particular sector where doctor is sensitive and averse to a change, this is more to do with socio-political implications, because the power and the role is getting transferred to the patient. Patient can know what treatment he is going to undergo, and patient can do a self-diagnosis through a WebMD app. So you can check whether he is giving the right medication. So such kind of, the role is actually shifting towards the patient more, and doctors do not actually prefer somebody to question. In India, we don't have a system called, when introducing online prescriptions, that was a big thing, because doctors usually prefer to prescribe not the generic name but the drug, because the pharmacies and the pharmaceutical companies actually pay a lot of money for the doctors, so they prefer to write the drug name rather than the generic name. And such kind of so this has to do with more to do with socio-political implications. So it is very important thus to study the cognitive processes guiding the adoption. So my aim of the study is basically to investigate the drivers and the inhibitors of physicians' decision to use these kind of technologies in clinical practice, and as well as assess the relative impact. I have identified 2 research questions more or less line in with this objective. So the theory, and what I want to make an important point here is that traditional DOI studies, diffusion of innovation studies, do not actually, they neglect, until 2014, there are no papers, there are only few papers in the consumer resistance aspect. And one of the major arguments made by Cloudy et al. In 2015 is that reasons for and reasons against adoption are not necessarily opposites. It goes from the dual factor, if you remember, the hygiene factors and motivation factors of Herzberg, which says in the absence of inhibitors, if inhibitors are present, resistance would be there. But in the absence of, if inhibitors are absent, that doesn't mean it enhances the acceptance of the particular technology. So he pitches in this particular notion, and this is quite common in the literature also. There is a concept called as dual factor theory by Cefintelli 2004, which is also saying the similar things, which says that there are two opposing forces, intention to use and resistance to use, which actually leads to the actual use. So I want to take this behavioral reasoning theory, which is proposed by Westby 2005, where he says reasons actually mediate the influence of beliefs on the motives and the intentions and the behavior thereafter. So the main features of BRT is that you are, instead of just broadly construed beliefs which may not have any significance on the intention to adopt, they are considering the context-specific reasons. And there is, the reasons are conceptualized as dichotomous dimensions, reasons for and reasons against. which is also novel, which is in line with the previous comment. And it also provides, if you look at the figure here, you can see that there is a direct path from beliefs and values to the global motives, and there is another path which is through the reasons. So this is in line with the heuristic processing argument laid by Kahneman and Tversky, which says people often do not go for deep thinking, rather go for a heuristic processing of the information. Then comes the next point is the behavior. You can see a feedback loop which is going back to the reasons. That means as the action is enacted, this is in line with dissonance theory again. It is reinforcing the reasons, so it serves as a loop. So one of the major implications of this is that it can be used to change the consumer behavior. So that means if the central cause or the reason of this particular intention to adopt, say, there might be many beliefs, like staying in this company would fetch me more salary or better life, but my reason to move out would be my spouse is not getting a job option here, so I'll move out. So this is the central cause. So if you provide information which can address the central cause, you may change the behavior as well. So this is the model that I'm proposing, and my data collection and sampling goes like this. Universe, I want to generalize the study for the whole practitioners. Ayush practitioners are alternative medicine like Ayurveda, homeopathy, and all that. Because these people, these practitioners are more on these kind of portals. And for this study, other attitude, global motives, all those things are in the theory. I've taken the measures from the same place, but for identifying the context-specific reasons, I have conducted a reason elicitation study, which procedure suggested by the Westerby 2010 paper. 18 telephonic interviews were conducted, and I have coded. Ideally, there should be 2 coders, but I have just coded. It happened quite recently, and I want another person to code it. But I want you to look at the results. This is my demographics. This is what I get. The context-specific reasons for people adopt because it is services available, ubiquitously available. Then there are doctors adopt because there are anticipated social and financial returns because doctors becoming more popular. You can reach out to patients who are originally would be away. Those are the major reasons. And reasons against is, there is a concern that professional autonomy would be threatened when you go for such kind of portals. Then the doctors who do not want to prescribe anything because there are no legal frameworks in the country which can say who is responsible in terms of litigation. So there are other reasons. One of the prominent reasons is privacy and data security concerns also. This is what I have identified, and if I have time. Okay, so these are the implications. Theoretically, it's a novel framework. It focuses on the reasons against adoption, and more importantly, it identifies context-specific reasons rather than broadly construed beliefs.
I'm afraid we're running out of time, but maybe we have time for a question. What's the one question?
Moderate the relationship instead of being a consequence of your linear model. Can you come back to the model?
Yeah, this is. Can you see the model?
Yes.
Yeah, global.
Moderating instead of being explained by reasons.
Actually, the actual theory proposed by Westerby has this as a mediating the intentions. These are, if you see, attitude, subjective norms, and perceived control are quite common in the TAM literature or UTAT, but they are calling it as global motives because this is common across different settings. So they are saying that reasons actually influence the motivations, and reasons are certain factors which would justify your decision to take rather than and they also specify the difference between beliefs and reasons. Beliefs are more to do with embedded beliefs, but reason has to be narrow to the cognition process that you use for justifying your decision so that you get satisfied by the decision that you've taken. Yes, sir.
In terms of technology service providers, do you have any differentiation, government supported, international agency supported, or locally promoted technology service providers? When you spoke about the different companies, are you looking at any kind of differentiation?
So I was planning to conduct the research from the perspective of, one second, sir. So there are government sector initiatives, but they are not comparable to the private sector in terms of their services. But these are more to do with the customer-facing apps. So I don't intend to compare them, but rather I was planning to look at the private sector.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for our next session, we're going to have a virtual session by Jana Jacobson and Antolia Grants, Social Media Marketing, a Consumer Perspective. Thank you.
One, two, three.
By way of introduction, my name is Jenna Jacobson, and I am presenting this paper entitled Social Media Marketing, a Consumer Perspective on behalf of myself and Anatoly Gruz at Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada. In this presentation, I will first introduce social media marketing and describe our theoretical framework. Second, I will describe the research questions and methods used in the research. Then I'll outline the preliminary findings, as this is an ongoing work in progress. And finally, I'll wrap up with the conclusion. The ready access and availability of social media has opened up a wealth of data that has allowed marketers to leverage for strategic insights and digital marketing. Social media marketing is used across sectors and refers to, and I quote, the utilization of social media technologies, channels, and software to create, communicate, deliver, and exchange offerings that have value for an organization's stakeholders. Based on individuals' privacy settings, user-generated content can be privately accessible or publicly accessible on social media. Third parties, such as marketers, typically have access to publicly available social media data, which is the focus of this research. The use of social media in marketing has contributed towards the individualization of marketing, where organizations can communicate, collect data, and provide personalized responses for customers. Marketers are then able to extract actionable insight and use this insight to provide a competitive edge in the marketplace. As we've seen highlighted by the recent Cambridge Analytica scandal and the new GDPR, there is a growing need to understand consumer attitudes towards the use of their own social media data. There's also a lack of professional norms regarding the use of social media in marketing and a gap in understanding consumers' attitudes towards marketers' use of their social media data. By understanding what drives consumer comfort with this emerging marketing practice, we can propose strategies for marketers that can support and mitigate consumers' concerns so that consumers can still maintain trust in this new practice. In terms of the theoretical framework, we rely on Donaldson and Dunphy's integrative social contracts theory, which bridges the empirical and the normative approaches in business ethics. Still is a lack of understanding to develop these effective consent models relating to marketers' use of social media data. This is in part due to the recent emergence, but also due to the complexity of the issues. Previous research in this space has analyzed how marketers have developed decision-making, which provides insight into what is the current state of social media marketing, but it doesn't contribute towards an understanding of what marketing ethics ought to be. Accordingly, understanding the consumer perspective on marketers' use of their own social media data needs to be considered. To develop an understanding of the consumer perspective with this emerging practice, we ask, to what extent are consumers comfortable with marketers using their publicly available social media data? More specifically, does consumer comfort vary between opinion mining, targeted advertising, and customer relations? Beyond this base comfort, we want to understand what are the predictors of consumer comfort. Previous research indicates that an individual's comfort may be influenced by privacy concerns, self-disclosure, and their use of social media. However, there's a lack of research that analyzes the relationship to consumer comfort in this context. As such, we ask the following research question. What factors predict consumer comfort with marketers using publicly available social media data? Here we look at information privacy concerns, concerns about social threats, self-disclosure, and social media gratifications. For panel recruitment, we relied on a market research data company to provide a census-balanced sample of the online adult Canadian population 18 years and older. We collected 1,500 completed responses, but in this paper, we're analyzing 751 people, which represents a subset who have at least one public social media account. And this is because this is what third parties like marketers would actually be able to get access to. To address research question 1, we use SPSS for descriptive statistics and to conduct factor analysis. Using a 7-point scale, we measured individuals' comfort with the practice of marketers accessing consumers' publicly available information on social media. We also measured consumers' comfort with 3 different functions of using social media data for marketing. First, extracting information via opinion mining. Second, delivering information via targeted advertising. And then communicating via customer relations with new or existing customers. For the second research question, we use partial least square structural equation modeling, which is a preferred method when prediction is the goal of the analysis with no assumption of the data distribution. The resulting model explains 20% of the variance. Now to the findings. The vast majority of online Canadians surveyed are uncomfortable with marketers using their publicly available social media data. And this really points to the importance of this topic in the wider marketing as well as the research community. Only 19.7% of participants were comfortable with this practice. And this is also the same percentage of participants who were neither comfortable nor uncomfortable, which presents an opportunity for marketers. There's an opportunity to educate the public about the ethical integrity of how marketers are using their data, but this requires the development and the communication of these ethical standards across marketing practitioners. Of the 3 marketing practices, consumers are least comfortable with marketers using their social media data for targeted advertising, followed by customer relations, and finally, consumers are slightly more comfortable with their social media data being used for opinion mining about products and services. However, factor analysis confirms that all 3 load on a single factor, so consumer comfort does not significantly vary across all 3 of these marketing functions. For PLS-SEM results, we found that there is a negative and significant relationship between organizational privacy concerns and comfort. This suggests that consumers who are generally concerned about privacy are also more concerned about marketers using their social media data. We found that there is a negative and significant relationship between concerns about social threats and comfort. This suggests that consumers who are concerned about other users, other social media users using their data, are also more concerned about marketers using their data. Next, there is a positive and significant relationship between self-disclosure, referring to both the amount and depth of self-disclosure, and comfort with marketers using their social media data, which suggests that active social media users are more comfortable with this practice, perhaps because they want to have their voices heard on social media. Similarly, there's also a significant and positive relationship between the use of social media for social reasons and comfort, which suggests that benefits can outweigh the concerns if people are using social media for socialization reasons. Interestingly, there was no significant relationship between the other dimensions of gratification, including information, entertainment, and self-presentation. In conclusion, even if marketers are working with publicly available social media data, consumers still have concerns about the use of their own data. As a result, it's important for marketers to be transparent in their data collection as well as their data analyses. The findings contribute towards this emerging research area as well as the practice relating to social media marketing by understanding the consumer perspective as well as the predictors of consumer comfort. While ethical issues have certainly always arisen in marketing, marketing professionals are now tasked with more complex and insidious ethical situations that require a high level of technical literacy, but also ethical literacy. Consumers' trust and confidence is a required factor in order for businesses to maintain these positive long-term relationships with their customers. As such, it's not just an ethical practice, but it's also a practice that makes sound business sense. The integrative social contracts theory encourages decision makers to consider the norms of all relevant communities. The decision makers, in this case being marketers, need to deeply recognize and consider all of the stakeholders that may be impacted by their practices, including consumers. As the practices of using social media in marketing are still developing, we advocate for ethics and consideration of consumers' concerns to be integrated into marketers' practices. Thank you.
Questions or comments to Gina and Grants? We have 1 minute, 2 minutes for questions. Okay, so maybe we should move to our last presentation, titled Challenges of Social Media Marketing, a longitudinal case study of an international hotel chain by Karin Hogberg, University of West Sweden.
Hello everyone, my name is Karin Högberg. I'm a researcher at University West in Sweden. I am presenting a paper called Challenges of Social Media Marketing, a longitudinal case study of an international hotel chain. What I'm focusing here is, I'm focusing on social media as a new way of interaction and communication online in a marketing perspective, of course. And we do know from earlier research that organizations are experiencing a great pressure to implement social media into their existing marketing strategies. And we also discuss social media in earlier research as very interactive in its nature. It gives organizations and customer a possibility of co-creation and interact online and co-create value together. It can also help organizations to identify customer needs and to improve service and products, for example. But what also is emphasized in earlier research is that social media is a source of information, an important tool for customers to make their voices heard. So customers are no longer passive receivers of marketing messages, and the content that customers are producing and spreading in social media are often discussed as electronic word of mouth, and we do emphasize that they are very important and have a great power in the relationship between customers and organizations. So one of the central purposes of marketing, of course, is to create long-lasting relationship with customers, and this has also been emphasized in social media marketing research very recently. I'm focusing on social media marketing in hospitality. So hospitality in hotels is the context of the study, and social media has in many ways transformed how organizations provide service and create service relationships. For example, the service encounter, the meeting where the customer and the organization interact, has, before we had social media and digital platforms, was created in a physical environment, for example, in a hotel reception. But today, with social media and digital platforms, this encounter takes place in a digital arena, which of course is a challenge for organizations. So hotels are greatly affected by how travelers and their customers use social media, because social media has come to be very important in how they make decisions about what hotels to book or what places to visit. And a lot of research has focused on the consumer perspective of social media marketing and hospitality, how they make decisions and what do they post and so on. And from the supplier's point of view, we have studied to a great extent the possibilities of marketing, like return on investment and how messages are received by customers. So the aim and RQs of this study is to focusing on the lack of research that are looking at organizational challenges of creating and using social media marketing strategy over time. So I seek to develop an increased understanding of the challenges concerning how hotel organizations use social media marketing over time. And I've been asking two questions. The first one is, how does the hotel chain develop their social media marketing strategy over time? And the second one is, what organizational challenges can be identified related to social media marketing over time? And the framework, how I'm framing the study, is mainly based on relationship marketing, which focus on the dialogue between the organizations and their customers, but also as a way of creating or gaining knowledge about the customer needs. And it also involves a learning process for the organizations, of course, how to learn how to use this new way of marketing themselves and the new way of being interactive in a new platform. But I also found it interesting to see or to look at how this relationship is changed due to social media, because the customers has been given a more powerful position, and by creating, for example, online reviews and being interactive with organizations. The methodology here is, I've been doing a longitudinal case study and I've been following an international hotel chains for 4 years, from 2013 to 2017. So when I started to follow the chain, they had just taken the decision to implement social media marketing into their entire organization. And this is a huge process because this is an organization that has over 500 hotels in all over the world, and the strategy was to implement social media marketing from the decision was made on a hotel chain level, and then they implemented it in each local hotels all around the world. So the data collection here is based on 37 semi-structured interviews with marketing manager at 14 hotels in 7 European countries. And I also been doing 15 follow-up interviews with marketing managers in order to understand how they use social media marketing over time and how the strategy changes and develops over time. I made observations at 14 hotels in 7 European countries, and I also made online observations on social media platforms used by these 14 hotels in order to understand what content they are publishing, what purpose they have, how they interact, and so on in social media platforms. And this has been made over 4 years. And also, I've been given the opportunity to take part of written documents such as strategies and social media policies that the hotel chain has developed and implemented and used in these local hotels that I have studied. So the findings here, first of all, I kind of believe that they have a quite basic use of social media. When I say basic, I mean that they are using social media or focusing on being present in social media platforms rather than being interactive and seeking interaction and creating relationships. They haven't quite adapted their marketing strategy that much to social media, and it's quite obvious that the social media use is not a natural part of the organizational structure or culture. That is, it's kind of put on top of everything else, and it's not that prioritized by the organizations. So one of the reasons for this is the great fear of losing control over the brand. And what I noticed here was that during these 4 years, the strategy changed. That from the beginning, the local hotels were allowed to use social media marketing or use social media for marketing purposes. That was the basic strategy. But then during the years, these strategies changed because the use of social media started to sprawl that much and was very there was a lot of different content from different hotels with different quality. So after a couple of years, the hotel chain management decided to centralize the social media marketing use because they wanted to control the brand and control what content that were published in social media channels. It was also obvious that these strategies were changing very fast, so it was difficult for the local hotels to implement these strategies properly because it was changing like all the time. What I also found was that the employees at the local hotels, or the managers at the local hotels, their personal interest in social media and the value that they thought social media marketing has were affecting how the social media marketing was used at each local hotel. So if a manager didn't see the value of using social media, then they didn't use social media. And quite the opposite, if the manager saw a great value in social media, they used it and thought it was important to implement it at the local hotel. It was also evident that the interaction that the hotels has with customers in social media takes place in platforms where customers has created and published content rather than content published and made by the hotels. So a lot of interactions take place in like TripAdvisor, where the customer has made a review and the hotel wants to answer that review in order to provide better service and to be polite and so on, and show other customers that they are interactive and actually taking these comments into consideration. But there were very little interaction in like platforms like Facebook, like the hotel's own Facebook platforms. So when you summarize this, you can say that they are striving to be interactive and to create some kind of relationship, but it's very hard for them, and they are being more reactive than interactive, and they are reacting on other like customers' inputs and publish what they have published in social media marketing. And they are also excuse me, highly influenced by a traditional one-way communication marketing activities. So they are used to pushing out content and not receiving interaction on this content. So my conclusions here this far is that I'm trying to develop an increased understanding of the challenges and to contribute to existing literature by providing a theoretical understanding of social media marketing activities over time and how the strategies are developed and used over time. Okay, thank you.
Any questions? I'm sure you must be relieved that this is last presentation. So feel free to ask any question you have to take out all your frustration, yeah? So, any question, a comment? Elias? No? No? Vignesh? Ili? Anything? No? Okay, so I think we just thank Arthur again for her presentation. Thank you very much. And this is now closing, but before I do the closing, I invite my co-chairs and those who assisted. So I invite Dr. Rana, Dr. Hatish, Dr. Emma Slade, Kuti, and Pushpa, just to come here. Laura is sitting there. I would like to have Laura here, but if she wouldn't like to mind to join us. Please come.
Gender divide.
Gender divide, mix.
We are mixed. Shall I come to you guys?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Okay. Smile, everyone. 3, 2, 1. Is that all? That's the best you can do? Oh, that's better. That's better. Good.
So, you know, closing, basically, just wanted to say thank you to number of you, especially first thing authors who contributed their work in this workshop and came all the way here or did all the effort to do virtual presentation. I can tell you how many emails we exchanged in order to get the videos. So it has been very cumbersome process, but we all together did it. So thank you so much, every one of you who contributed in this workshop. After authors, I would say Laura did lots of hard work in terms of managing the logistics. So thank you, Laura. And obviously my co-authors who read 15 papers, each of my co-editors, 15 papers each they read and prepared the review comments, which will go to authors. It hasn't been to, but it will go to authors. So thank you very much, Hatish, Rana, Emma, and obviously Nitish is not here, who is from St. Louis University, US. He couldn't be with us. So thank you very much, all of you. Pushpa and Kuti sitting here. Pushpa did lots of legwork at the beginning by gathering emails of all the people published in digital marketing area and sending them email to kind of generate interest. And that's why you are here. Yeah. And Kutty is obviously, you can see lots of tweet going around and lots of other things Kutty helped with. So our team really did a great job. Thank you so much, everyone. But then today, it would not have been possible unless such a competent team of digital media suite was there. So I would like to read out name: Georgios, Terrell, Daniela, Alice, and Evan. So all of you done wonderful job in terms of broadcasting it in real time. You can see how many comments, not only coming from authors and presenters, even those who not contributed in the workshop, they also commenting and sending suggestions to the authors. So it has been very fruitful day to all of us and even our external audience. I think we have managed to connect at certain extent. So thank you so much, everyone, for doing whatever you have done to make this successful. Thank you so much. We haven't quite finished yet because we want to take a picture here. All of you, those who were involved in assisting here, everyone together.
Before the picture, taking the opportunity just for 10 seconds, we would like to thank you, Yogesh, for making this happen.
So Georgia suggested that we take some pictures here and we take a picture outside as well because it's quite kind of cramped here. So we'll take some here and then we go out. Yeah. So
do you just want to sign off to everyone online and look at everything?
So everyone, thank you very much. Bye for now, and we will join you again in future events. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.